What is up, family? Welcome into another edition of Make Every Second Count Live. With me, your host and international award-winning Make Every Second Count speaker. Now, I try very, very hard to come up with guests that have an interesting story, and a lot of times they're in this country. As of last week, and this week, they're not in this country. And we'll have to find out more about this one. But I ask you if you would please, please, please share this episode out. Invite as many people to watch it as you can. In fact, you can just name some people or tag them in the comments. I would love that. And then also make sure you give us all kinds of thumbs up, hearts, frowny faces, cry faces. Heck, you can even get mad at us. I don't mind. Just help us trick the algorithm on one of the socials that we're on. Also, please keep the comments coming. We want to have more of a conversation than make a presentation to you. So ask as many questions as you would like, dig as deep as you would like, and if they're not a question we want to answer, we won't do that. But with no further ado, I would like to bring up David. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, Jeff. I'm not able to hear you.
Uh, can't hear me? All right. Hang on. We'll figure this out. Now? All right. Hang on. I'll try this. Now? No. All right. I'm going to log out and come back in. I'll be back. Now. How about now? Can you hear me now? Um, hmm. All right. Still can't hear me?
I heard the introduction, but I can't hear your voice at all.
That's so weird. Um, Hang on. Any different? Huh. Audio. Hold on. How about now? Um,
I heard everything until you started talking on the show.
what about now? How about now? Well, you go out and come back. Good idea, Robert. Hey everybody, welcome in tonight. We're having some technical issues at the moment, and that is to be expected because you will find out why here in a minute. But I try very hard to give you guys some interesting guests, and tonight's guest is very interesting. So hang in there. We'll get these technical issues fixed and we'll get onto the air. Oh, excuse me. All right. I'm trying to, let's see. All right. Where can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right, awesome. So, welcome into the show, David. I'm glad that
Thank,
you were able to come here with me tonight.
yeah,
So, if
thank you.
you
Thank
would
you.
like to go through a short introduction, tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and where you are now, and what you do.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, Jeff, I'm David Kincaid. And although I grew up in Tampa, Florida, in the United States, I most recently lived in Denver, Colorado. I'm a digital nomad, so I am currently in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And what I
What?
do,
Wait a
yep,
minute, time out. We need to stop there for a minute. So, what time is it there?
it is just a little bit after 7 o'clock in the morning.
And you got up to be on this show?
I got up to be on this show.
That is nuts to me, and I appreciate your willingness to get on and serve people.
You got it. Well, when you're 12 hours ahead of East Coast time, you have to do things at some awkward times. So it's okay. It's okay.
That is awesome. We appreciate your drive.
I appreciate you.
So I know from personal experience. You see, I was in a car accident when I was 17. I spent 3.5 months in the hospital and 2.5 months in a coma. I was told I would probably never walk again, but I'm here now and I am doing this show each and every week for 10 seasons now. This is the
Wow.
10th season. And I'm so honored to be able to help my community, help out the world, and show them that things are possible. But I believe that we don't just go through things. If we want a good life, we have to grow through things. And by that, I mean you don't just go through them, but you adjust mentally and you find out new ways and learn different lessons from things. So, has there been anything that you have had to grow through?
There's been a lot, but I'm just going to focus on one of them, and that is homelessness. And I was just a young suburban white boy in Tampa, Florida, and but I was unfortunately also a gay white boy, and I was growing up in a very conservative environment. And so that didn't really go well. And I hid that for many, many years until I came out, at which point I was asked to leave the university where I was at, which was a Baptist university. And so it was religiously affiliated. I had a petition signed against me by my church. And so I was also removed from my church, which was my community, really, because I was an avid churchgoer. And then my family finally asked me to leave as well, which left me homeless. And it was a rough time. Not that anybody's prepared to be homeless, but I certainly wasn't in the mindset that that was part of my trajectory or that was even a possibility. And so it was pretty shocking, and it was a devastating period of time, and it did not help me in the least with dealing with the big issue, which was that I wasn't really willing to be who I was. I wasn't really willing to um, be the full expression of who I am as an individual and as a person. And I felt like I was caught in a world where I was being punished for being that person. And so that led to some pretty dark places. And I was harmed quite a bit. I was beat up multiple times while I was homeless. I was robbed. I got to experience the criminal side of human life. Yeah, so that was kind of the challenge that I faced.
Yeah, that's crazy. So we have a comment here that I want to point out, and I want to take exception with, because I don't know who this is. Mince pie doesn't even sound good, but this said, with due respect, there are a million homeless in America. Is this man an exception to the rule
Mhm.
or an anomaly? And I don't know how, I don't know what that actually means, but oh well. And so I know there are a lot of homeless people, and
Yeah, there are.
we respect them all, but this guy was kicked out of his life due to being homosexual.
Yeah,
You might agree with that, you might disagree with that. I can't help you there, but it's powerful. You see,
yeah,
he actually grew through his situation. He figured something out, and he figured that he could get out of that situation. And now he is a digital nomad, and he's found purpose in his life. So we're trying to discover how he found purpose in his life. So we're going to talk to him about that. But yes, he is the exception because he is an exceptional human being. So I want to say hi to Robert Brooker. I want to say hi to my dad. Hi to Mince Pie. I don't know who you are, but I'm glad you're in here tonight. I want to say hi to Ben Bruce, Chris, um, and then I think that those are all the people that I can see right now. So, but we thank you guys so much for joining us, and we ask if you would please hit that like button because that helps us get more followers and more people watching the show. So I have to ask, how exactly did that make you feel? I mean,
yeah,
getting kicked out of your life.
yeah, yeah. That's a good question. And I do want to address the question that was asked because it's a really great question of whether or not this is an exception or anomaly. It is not an exception that a homosexual person was kicked out of their home. That is not an exception. That is very, very, very common, even in today's world. And remember that this is like I'm older, so this is about 30 years ago for me. But I've also done a lot of work with homelessness since that time, and I have learned that there are thousands and thousands of young people across the country of America who have been kicked out of their homes because of their sexual orientation, and they are walking the streets. And so, how did that make me feel? It made me feel really betrayed. It had such incredible potential to turn me against my fellow humans and to turn me against life itself. But I made a really big decision for myself when that first happened. And I had a little prayer to God, and I said, God, you know what? I'm really wounded by church, by faith, by religion, by all of these concepts that told me that I was going to be loved, and I felt betrayed by those. But I said, God, I'm going to come back to this at a different time, but I'm going to have spirituality and I'm going to have my faith in God be on the basis of a direct relationship, and it's not going to be dependent on these other people who have behaved poorly in my life. And so I didn't let that betrayal turn into bitterness and resentment. And I think that's very important because later down the road, there was a lot of things that continued to come out of the homelessness, like addiction and whatnot after that, that I had to deal with as well. And I was able to deal with them with an open heart and not with that kind of resentment.
All right, so hey, wait a minute. You just mentioned something else in there that you have grown through, and I find that to be something that is crazy because I know we have talked to a lot of people that have been addicted on this show before, and I know how hard that is. So I want to ask, like, you mentioned you had addiction. What was it that you were addicted to?
Yeah. Well, there was many things. The big one was crystal methamphetamine. That was a drug that became really highly popularized near the end of the 90s, and especially in the gay community. It took on a whole kind of party atmosphere around it, and so it became a part of a certain type of culture. And I got wrapped up in that culture, which I encountered coming out of the homelessness piece. And also, I was, emotionally, I was desperate to feel connection and to feel part of something. And I kind of ended up experimenting with crystal methamphetamine before I knew what it was. I was completely naive and really foolish. Um, but addiction is a funny thing because addiction stands on its own. It doesn't really require a subject, so it doesn't require that you say like meth or whatnot. Because addiction shows up in all areas of a person's
Yeah,
life. And
definitely.
so, like there was sexual addictions in there, there was pornography in there. I abused alcohol, and I smoked cigarettes for a really long time, and methamphetamine. And so it was really about coming through addiction as a subject, not just getting rid of each individual substance. Because there's something there was something in my heart, there was a hole in my heart that was seeking to be filled, and it was looking for anything to do so.
Yeah. I had a guest on here a couple of like the second episode of season 10, and his name was Dr. Rob Kelly, and he does like all addiction stuff with people. And he says that addiction a isn't really something that people don't go and crave alcohol.
Hmm.
They're addicted to doing certain things.
Yeah.
And he has a proven way that he can break that addiction for people, but it's just cool because he says that it's more of a mental illness than an actual problem with the drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
I find that to be very cool. So,
Yeah.
how exactly did you find to be a digital nomad?
Mm. Yeah. So when I started really coming out of the homelessness situation and kind of got my feet back on the ground, I decided that I'd been a really good student in high school, and I loved studying, and so I returned to school at age 31, and I was really driven at that point because I'd had this huge period of time where I'd just been kind of lost that had been prompted by this homeless period. And so I decided that I really wanted to go back to school. And so I did at 31. I got an anthropology degree. I then went and I then got a master's degree in international affairs and economics. And then I got a fellowship with the White House in the United States federal government. And then
Wow,
later finally became a diplomat for the United States government to Indonesia. So I had a
wow,
very rapid ascent. But what I found in all of that is that I was using all of that as an answer to this bigger problem that had occurred, which was a lack of love of myself and a lack of acceptance of myself. And so I resigned from my job as a diplomat, and I decided that I wanted to go on my own journey around the world, which I did. And I did it it was my own inner seeking journey where I wanted to heal these problems that had arisen in my life, and I wanted to come to terms and forgive and love and really step into the way of life that I wanted to have from the very beginning. And so I went on a journey to do that, and I sought lots of therapy. I sought lots of friends, but really I sought to find out what lights me up, what lights David Kincaid up, and to lean in that direction and begin to take action in that direction and begin to look at all those negative thoughts that I have about myself that criticize and attack and put me down. And I just began to inquire into each and every one of them until that mindset began to shift so profoundly that I realized that what I was really here about is helping my fellow human beings. And I love people. Regardless of all the terrible things that have been done to me by people, I love people.
That is amazing. So what all right, you've had all these terrible things done by people to you. How exactly do you keep that love for people alive when you have experienced all this misfortune?
That's a really excellent question. And in short, it's I continue to work on me. Like whenever I notice that I start to blame others or I become resentful to others, I really break it down and I ask myself, what specifically is my complaint? Because that's the thing to start inquiring into, because almost assuredly, my complaint is about me. And so that gives me the opportunity. That's kind of like the road sign that points back to me and says, David, there's some unfinished business in you. And so every time that I come back to that, whether it's resentment that I still harbor or a lack of forgiveness I still harbor, I dig into that and I ask, is that true that that person is a bad person? Because I don't believe that. I believe that people that did those things to me, did that in good faith in their consciousness. They weren't malicious in any way in their intent, though that is how that worked out. But they were just people doing what they thought was right. And so when I began to see my own self and I could wrestle with my own problems, it made me so much softer and gentler about other people and the complaints I see in them, because they're just reflecting the humanity that we all have. We're just human beings. We're just trying to do our very best. And
Yeah.
so, I needed to learn how to do my best and stand up for myself and to own who I am and to love who I am. And then I can go out in the world and suddenly everyone else looks absolutely wonderful and I just fall in love with them every day. Doesn't mean that I necessarily want to engage with them. I'm not going to engage with a mass murderer, but I love who that person is. I understand that they're on a journey and I wish all the best for them.
Yeah. Wow. That's profound. That's a answer that I wasn't expecting. I have to say, thank you so much for that. I deeply respect your opinion and the way you approach the world. It's just like refreshing.
I appreciate
So,
that.
we actually have a question from Ben Bruce. He says, what can you tell someone that is addicted to porn and drinking alcohol?
Yeah, porn, and I'm going to isolate porn here for a second. Porn is a really, really difficult addiction. In fact, I've seen statistics that the way that the hormones work inside of the head when we're watching porn is equivalent really to having a heroin addiction. And heroin and crystal meth are two of the most difficult drugs to break away from. You know, the thing about porn and alcohol and all addictions is we tend to want to steer clear of the addiction. We want to pretend like that they're not actually an addiction. We have it under control. And so, AA and a lot of these other kinds of organizations start with this, like, I am an alcoholic. I don't really like that. That's not my thing, because I don't think that I want to identify as the being of an alcoholic. But there may be an alcoholic problem that a person has. There may be a pornography problem that they have. So the first thing is to bring choice back to themselves. They have to start looking at, am I going to choose to drink that next drink? Am I going to choose to turn the porn on and watch it again? Because when you start to own the choice in the matter, then you take back your power and now you can change that. See, so long as the choice stays over there, like, oh, it just happens to me, or, oh, I was just at this happy hour, or, I was just at a party. That's all that was. Yeah. Well, when you start to look at that, you'll start to see you're at a lot of parties. You're at a lot of happy hours. And there's a reason for that. That you're in front of porn a lot. There's a reason for that, and that's because you are making choices that bring your environment to you. Right? They bring you in contact with alcohol. So you have to start then changing the environment. When there's that desire for porn, that's the perfect time to get up and go for a walk outside. They say it takes 15 to 20 minutes of being distracted to have a wave of craving pass. That means like when that wave comes, like, oh my gosh, I want to drink, or oh my gosh, time for porn, then just simply tell yourself, I'm gonna wait 15 to 20 minutes. And even if it doesn't work, you've taken 15 to 20 minutes of time back for your healthy self, right? And that's more time than you had yesterday. And so it's really about just staying in the game and always, always, always come back to loving yourself. The only reason that any of us have any addiction is because we are incapable of sitting in stillness and quiet with difficult thoughts and emotions. 100% of all addictions are because of an inability to sit with difficult emotions. So the only way to get out of that is to start sitting with them and to begin understanding what those difficult emotions feel like and getting used to feeling that, because only then from that place can you begin to change.
Wow, that was that was a great answer. I have to say, David, thank you so much for that. I hope that helps Ben Bruce. He answered it
Yeah.
in quite the profound way. So I dig his answers. So I have to ask, like, do you have any suggestions for other people that are struggling to love themselves?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one, because that's in the brain. And the older we get, the more it's just built into our DNA, to love ourselves. And what does that mean to love ourselves? And we're taught in our society actually not to love ourselves. We say silly things like, don't toot your own horn,
Hmm.
like
Woo-woo!
and the funny thing about that expression is, I'm like, if you're playing an instrument in the band, if you're not tooting your horn, then who is? You're dropping the ball. You're not doing your job. Because when you're playing an instrument in an orchestra or a symphony or a band, you are being counted on to play that instrument. That means that who you are is so important in how your life goes. You need to own and love who you are. That is your instrument in the orchestra. You are to play that instrument to the best of your ability and continue learning how to play it. And it's just practice. And that means that every time that those thoughts come into your mind, every single thought, every one, and remember that in the beginning it's going to be like a lot of thoughts, but as you practice, it gets less and less and less.
Yeah.
And so every thought that says, I'm not worth it, that's not me, you say, that's not true. Thank you for sharing, but that is not true. I choose that is me, that I do love me. I am worth it. And it really is just practice, practice, practice.
Wow, that's practice. Everything is practice. So it's like, if you want to get good at something, and I saw it somewhere in the comments here, that if you aren't programming yourself, somebody else will. So if you're not telling yourself that you love yourself, somebody else is going to say that you shouldn't love yourself. And
Yeah.
you'll believe that person. And that's so weird to me that you would self-sabotage like that. But it happens, I guess.
Well, I think you're pointing to something really amazing, and the only reason that you believe what the other person says about you is because that thought is already in here.
Oh,
We have to stop believing these thoughts. Like these
wow.
things happen. This is consciousness, and awareness is created when we stop and we inquire into our thinking. That means we investigate our own thinking. Don't worry about other people's thinking, worry about your thinking, because when your thinking is aligned with who and what you are, then your actions and your emotions are going to come out of that.
All right, so here I have a follow-up question to that. So, what is the best way to examine your own thinking?
There's a lot of models out there, for doing so, and I really like what Byron Katie has to say about this. And she has her 4 questions. She calls it the work. And I've used elements of this, and I've done a lot of training in her model. And I use elements of this in my coaching with my clients. And so one of the first things is to ask yourself, is that thought true? And a lot of us will answer immediately yes, that it's true. And so then the next question is, what evidence do you have that that thought may not be true? Right? So then that's the moment, just kind of look around, and almost immediately you can find that moment. Like, let's imagine that you've had people telling you all day long that you're a terrible person. And then there's that one person that says, you know what, I don't think you're terrible. I think you're wonderful. That's also evidence. And so when we begin to make ourselves remember, oh yeah, people have also told me really wonderful things about myself, then that thinking that we have begins to dissolve, because we begin to realize, aha, that thinking isn't true. And then we have to look at, like, how do I react when I believe these negative thoughts? And we react with negative reactions. We react out of resentment and fear and hatefulness. And that's just not where we're at.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on in this country right now. I don't know if you're experiencing any of it because you're in Thailand, but the Super Bowl halftime show Sunday night, people are going nuts about that.
I saw.
All right, well, yeah, I don't want to get into it, but I just would like, people are going absolutely nuts about that. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's a halftime show. If you don't want to watch it, turn it off.
That's right. Well, and you're pointing to something really interesting. And by the way, this stuff goes on all over the world. Currently, Thailand and Cambodia are in a border war over things that have been 100 years in the making. So, there's war and polarization going on everywhere. And, what you're pointing to is that people think that they have to get the rest of the world to act like they want it to before they can feel good. And this
Yeah.
is a lie. It's just a lie. When you begin to feel good yourself, when you do the work to get you to feel good, to get your thoughts aligned, then the world starts showing up differently, because it's just a projection of who you are.
Wow. That's wow. That's more food for thought. I dig that. I appreciate the knowledge that you have shared tonight. So I'm sorry to say that we're actually over time, but I did that on purpose because we kind of had some technical issues in the beginning, and it's starting to get busy there. I can hear it. But
The
so
rooster's crowing.
yeah, I want to say to you guys, including you, David, that you have to do me a favor this week, next week, and for the rest of your life. You have to make every second count. Why? Because you never know when the seconds will run out on your one life. That's all we get. I'll see you guys back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, or at 7 a.m. his time. But that's gonna be confusing to all you. So I'll see you guys back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, you have a great week. David, thank you so much for getting up this morning.
You got it. Thank you, Jeff.
Have a great one.
Take care.